In the heart of 19th century Salem, a man named Francis Levin Fries rose to prominence, not just through innovation, but through a network of exploitation. Born on October 17, 1812, into the Moravian community, Fries was baptized the very next day. Raised under strict religious guidance, he was groomed for discipline, obedience, and influence. At 5, he entered the Moravian boys' school. By 15, he was studying theology at Nazareth Hall in Pennsylvania. His path seemed destined for ministry, yet his ambitions turned toward power and profit. After returning to Salem to teach, Fries soon left the classroom behind. In 1836, at age 24, he became an officer in the Salem Cotton Manufacturing Company. With $50,000 in capital, which is over $1.8 million in today's currency, and 30 Moravian investors, he oversaw the construction of Salem's first steam-powered cotton mill.
At the time, Francis Fries was a very well-respected man. He was well-connected in the community. He was a benefactor to the church and to others, and he was supporting the city by also creating an industry here.
This was more than industry. It was the foundation of his empire. But behind the smoke and spinning wheels was another kind of fuel: enslaved labor.
I think it's important to note that Francis Fries was very much a proponent of slavery. Enslavement was what allowed him to make as much money as he did. It allowed him to run his factories, and it was supporting him in his household. So when we look at this, I think that we can definitely find the motivation for him to want to keep enslavement as an institution and to further it in the community as well.
In 1839, Fries and his father began building a woolen mill with enslaved people among those laying the stones. The mill became a vertically integrated operation, dyeing, spinning, and weaving, all done under one roof. His brother Henry joined the firm in 1846. A second cotton mill followed in 1848. Fries' ads promoted a cheap, rough fabric used to clothe enslaved people. The irony was cruel. Those who wove the fabric were also the ones forced to wear it.
Francis Fries was the man who brought industry to Salem and to Forsyth County. He was the first industrialist for the area, but more than that, he brought a mindset which took this area from being a theological enclave and made it connected to the larger economy and world. And he did a lot of that connection work personally. At the end, I think by 1860, that woolen mill had 77 employees, over half of which were enslaved. The success of the mill made it difficult to argue against it. One of the things that's a challenge for people in our age to go back and look at is to see when folks like Fries were arguing to the church leadership, do not deny us what is a civil right.
Fries was a fixture in civic life, designing buildings, joining the fire company, and sitting on the town's ruling board. But his public image was layered over a private reality of ownership. He resigned from the town council twice over debates on slavery, not because he opposed it, but because he defended his expanding reliance on it.
Historians are having to come to a sense of where we are with ourselves and the collective memory of this, because he was an enslaver and he did support the institution of slavery.
By the 1840s, Moravian Salem had largely abandoned its early stance against slaveholding. Fries and his wife, Lisetta, enslaved at least 16 black men, women, and children by 1847. By 1860, the Fries business held 48 enslaved individuals and 5 slave dwellings, a staggering number for this part of North Carolina. The town watched and benefited, but rarely questioned.
The connections that had to be so fluid when the country's conversations about politics and slavery was fluid. In the records of the Moravians, which anybody can go online to read, I think it's volume 8, you'll see letters sent by his family to him when he was away at school in Nazareth, where he is being told information about the slaves that he left at home. Fanny, Adam, their kids, warmly told stories about people that he grew up with.
Fries documented everything. His ledgers record not only business expenses and estate holdings, but also the names, duties, and fates of those he enslaved. Every life reduced to a line item. He called them "my boys," a parentalistic euphemism for ownership. Among them, George, whose death appears in Fries's diary with a chilling brevity. Fries wrote simply, "shot himself." No grief, no explanation, just a footnote to someone's legacy.
Also, when we're looking at this, having just a separate graveyard for people who are enslaved does indicate a class issue here. I think that Francis Fries was doing this because he was trying to have influence over how the people of Salem felt about slavery. Many Moravians were against the institution of enslavement from the very beginning, and Francis Fries was a huge proponent of this. And I think that by fencing in this graveyard and making this place look a little bit nicer and maybe a little bit more like the God's Acre that now only white people could be buried in, gave it a sense of, oh, we're not doing anything bad to these people. Francis Fries inherits a book called The Manual of Pyrotechny that was published by West Point Academy. He inherited this from Gottlieb Schober, and Gottlieb Schober had come into possession of this book in the 1820s whenever it was first published.
Fries never wore a uniform, but his loyalties were clear. His mills produced Confederate fabric throughout the war. His son worked midnight shifts to meet Southern demands. He kept a manual on explosives in his library, and in 1840 he co-designed a gunpowder storage facility with secret compartments. Ledgers record his orders of 100 kegs of gunpowder, far beyond typical factory use. Blueprints hint at hidden structures beneath the mills. Did he intend to arm the Confederacy more directly? Was he preparing for private military production? The evidence is fragmentary, but the intent grows louder with every rediscovered ledger.
We can also see Francis Fries's impact with the advancement of the textile industry here in Winston-Salem, where we still see that today with Hanes Factory and others. However, when we're looking at this, Francis Fries was someone who was supporting the Confederacy, he was supporting war as a whole, and he was supporting enslavement. And when we're talking about someone who has such a large legacy here in this area, we do have to consider that just because they were funding things and helped to establish all of these industries, this was a person who was relying on enslavement to create those things. He would not have been as successful without those enslaved people. He would not have been as financially successful without the free labor that was provided by these enslaved people. So it's important for us to all know that and recognize that Winston-Salem's history is based on enslavement and is a large part of how we see ourselves today and that we need to reckon with.
By the early 1860s, Fries controlled land, infrastructure, flocks, mills, and housing across Salem. Though he died in 1863 from bronchitis, his estate was immense. When adjusted to today's values, his net worth across real estate, business, enslaved labor, and production would likely rank in the hundreds of millions. That kind of fortune was not just earned, it was extracted. The footprint of Francis Fries remains. The Brookstown Inn still stands where enslaved hands once wove cotton. His family helped design Salem College's main hall. His roads and blueprints shaped the city. But prosperity came with a price, and for too long, only part of the story has been told. Fries's grave is among the greatest in God's Acre. Just yards away, those he enslaved lie beneath plain wooden markers, many unnamed. The contrast speaks volumes. Public honor built on private suffering. Francis Levin Fries was no outlier. He was both a product and a shaper of a society that wrapped oppression in cloth and called it progress. His story is not just about industry. It's about how religion, power, and profit conspired to turn a community into an economy of control. To understand the history of Salem is to confront the truth, because legacy is not just what we build, it's what we're willing to admit.
One of the difficulties not being in a time is to understand all the forces that go into the way people are shaped. Fries grew up in a slave-holding household. That was not an abnormal thing for his experience. However, we in life have other experiences, and certainly by the time he was a mature adult business person, he knew there was a large number of people who had moral qualms about slavery. The Quakers were down the road in Greensboro running the Underground Railroad. There were many people within the Moravian Church who were opposed to slavery. The church in Europe, and there was a letter in the Moravian archives from the church in Great Britain, had lobbied the Southern Moravians, please give up slavery, it is a moral curse. We need to free ourselves from this.